There is a living darkness that breathes within the towering, time-worn peaks of the Appalachian Mountains. A sinister force that has whispered its dreadful secrets into the ears of secluded communities for countless generations. I am your host from Story Villa, and tonight I am about to rip away the veil covering 12 true accounts so disturbing, so utterly incomprehensible, that they may shatter your perception of what really lurks within the wilderness. These are not simple tales invented for firesides, nor half-drunken stories spun by uncles, nor fabricated urban myths for cheap scares. What you are about to hear are carefully documented encounters with something deeply malicious. Accounts that were hidden, suppressed, and intentionally buried to keep the public blind to the truth. Each narrative comes directly from true witnesses, from families of mountain dwellers who for generations have lived with inexplicable events that go far beyond logic. But before we step into these chilling revelations, I ask one thing from you. If you believe yourself brave enough to confront the real darkness that prowls just beyond the tree line, there are 3 essential things you must do now. First, strike that subscribe button with force, because what you are about to uncover is not for the faint-hearted. Second, activate the notification bell so that you never miss the horrifying truths we reveal here. And third, leave a comment with the words, "I'm brave enough," to prove that you have the strength of mind to face these mountain terrors head-on. The Appalachian Range has kept its secrets for centuries, holding horrors so profound they could break the sanity of most who hear them. These ancient valleys and mist-shrouded forests cling tightly to stories that were never meant to slip beyond their borders. What we are about to unfold is not just another paranormal documentary. This is a deliberate excavation of an evil so entrenched in these mountains that it forces us to reconsider what we know about safety, about reality itself, and about the fragile barrier separating the known from the unknown. Prepare yourself, because some tales were never meant for human ears, and some truths should have stayed buried in the heart of these unforgiving peaks. Our descent begins with the first account, a story so nightmarish it has tormented the people of Silver Run, West Virginia, for decades. The case of Mary Shepherd is not just another unsolved disappearance. It is a grim monument to the shadow that stalks the Appalachian wilderness. A chilling tale that blurs the boundaries between what we call human and what cannot be explained. In late autumn of 1987, Mary Shepherd, a 34-year-old botanist working for West Virginia State University's Environmental Research Program, embarked on a study that would end in mystery, specializing in rare Appalachian flora. She had spent years charting the fragile ecosystem of the Silver Run Wilderness, a remote and nearly untouched stretch of mountain forest. Mary's peers knew her as thorough, daring, and obsessively committed to her work. On October 17th of that year, she set out on what was planned as a routine 3-day botanical survey. She was experienced, expertly prepared, and fully accustomed to the terrain. The purpose of her trip was to catalog rare plant species thought to exist only in the most isolated valleys of Silver Run. Colleagues remembered her excitement about the possibility of confirming a new variety of mountain orchid, one that local tribal legends had hinted at for generations. But what followed became one of West Virginia's most unnerving mysteries. At first, Mary's updates came as expected. Her satellite radio check-ins were clear. Her GPS trail showed steady, organized movement through her research grid. Then, on the evening of October 19th, everything shifted. Her final transmission, recorded at exactly 8:47 p.m., was unlike anything her team had heard before. The recording began with Mary's calm report, describing her precise location and findings. Then abruptly, the tone collapsed into chaos. The tape picked up frantic breathing, the unmistakable sound of tearing fabric, followed by guttural noises that no analyst could categorize as human. Most unsettling was what came next, a voice or what sounded disturbingly like one speaking in a tongue no scholar could trace. It was neither English, nor any indigenous dialect from the region. nor a language known to modern linguistics. Experts from 3 separate universities all concluded that the sounds could not be classified. After that, Mary Shepard was gone. A massive search commenced, pulling in more than 200 volunteers alongside police, state officers, rescue workers, and even local tribal members. Helicopters swept the wilderness, dogs tracked her trail, and advanced thermal technology was deployed. Yet what they uncovered raised more fear than clarity. Roughly 12 miles from her last known location, Mary's professional gear was discovered. Her satellite radio GPS unit and specialized botanical kit lay neatly arranged in a clearing. None of the items showed damage. Her open backpack contained her field journal, spread carefully across the ground. The entries inside remained intact, but the handwriting grew increasingly unstable, the words breaking apart in panic. The last entry was almost illegible. Something is watching. Not human, not animal. The mountain knows. Investigators noted eerie anomalies at the site. Despite being in the middle of untamed woodland, there was no trace of wildlife, no tracks, no insect life, no signs of disturbance. It appeared as though the place had been drained of living presence altogether. Forensics later uncovered microscopic residue near the clearing. The material, though organic, fit no known biological category. Independent labs all returned inconclusive findings. To this day, no remains of Mary Shepard have ever surfaced. Her disappearance is an open file, another spectral absence swallowed by the Appalachians. But, in the years since, locals have sworn to hearing strange voices, speaking in incomprehensible languages, drifting through the valleys. Summer air turning freezing cold without warning, and compass needles spinning violently while GPS systems blinked into failure. Elders of nearby native tribes offered grim explanations. Their oral traditions tell of entities that roamed these mountains before mankind, beings who guarded sacred spaces from intrusion. They warned that some boundaries are forbidden and some paths should never be crossed. Mary's story stands as an unsettling reminder that the mountains do not give up their secrets. They guard them with a predatory will. Whether she was taken by a hidden predator, consumed by a supernatural force, or erased by something that lies outside our very framework of understanding, no one can say. But the truth is this: the Appalachians keep their silence well, and Mary Shepard's fate is a haunting warning. In these timeless, mist-veiled peaks, the darkness does not simply exist, it hunts. Now, we descend deeper into our second tale, a nightmare rooted in the small town of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, one that has echoed for generations. This is not just another tale spun around campfires, but a carefully recorded chain of events that would challenge everything we think we know about reality, prophecy, and the fragile border between our world and something far more sinister. The account begins on a crisp November evening in 1966, when 2 young couples drove along a lonely road near the deserted World War II TNT plant outside Point Pleasant. Roger and Linda Scarberry, along with Steve and Mary Mallet, were ordinary working-class couples out for a casual night drive, unaware that they were about to be thrust into one of the most chilling paranormal encounters in American history. As their car neared the abandoned munitions complex, they noticed something that would forever alter their lives. Perched near a weathered generator building was a being that defied all rational understanding. Standing close to 7 feet tall, its form was humanoid, yet disturbingly alien. Huge, reflective red eyes glowed like burning coals within a face that seemed to waver and blur at its edges. Its body was described as grayish-brown with enormous wings folded tight against its back, and its entire presence gave the unsettling impression of being only half manifested in our reality. The thing moved with a disturbing grace. Its motions were both smooth and disjointed, like something not bound by the ordinary physics of motion. When it turned its blazing gaze toward the car, the witnesses felt a wave of dread unlike normal fear. It was a primal, existential terror that seemed to pierce into the deepest part of their beings. Roger, behind the wheel, slammed the accelerator, but the unthinkable occurred. The entity later known to the world as the Mothman effortlessly matched the speeding car, gliding or running beside them at impossible velocity. Even as the speedometer climbed to 100 miles per hour, the figure remained locked in pursuit, its crimson eyes fixed on the terrified passengers. This was only the beginning. What followed would transform Point Pleasant into the epicenter of one of the most heavily documented supernatural episodes in U.S. history. Over the coming months, countless residents of Point Pleasant reported their own encounters. Farmer Newell Partridge had in fact been among the earliest. On the night of November 14, 1966, before the car chase's television abruptly went dead, replaced by a strange electronic hum. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped outside. The beam illuminated two glowing red eyes reflecting back from the darkness near his barn. His dog Bandit immediately bolted toward the creature and was never seen again. Soon, local researchers and journalists began compiling these accounts. John Keel, a paranormal investigator who would go on to write the definitive chronicle of the events, spent months interviewing the traumatized witnesses. A clear pattern emerged. This was not simply a cryptid mystery, but something far deeper. Descriptions painted the portrait of an entity unconstrained by physical limits, an intelligent and predatory force that seemed to operate outside human comprehension. But the Mothman was not just a figure of isolated sightings. It became tangled with an atmosphere of foreboding that gripped Point Pleasant. Residents spoke of relentless nightmares, bizarre electrical disturbances, and the unnerving sensation of constantly being watched. Children sketched monstrous winged beings with blazing red eyes, dogs barked frantically at empty spaces, and appliances or radios faltered whenever the presence drew near. The most horrifying element of the Mothman saga was its eerie tie to a catastrophic tragedy that would scar the town forever. On December 15, 1967, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Gallipolis, Ohio suddenly collapsed during rush hour traffic. 46 lives were lost in one of the deadliest bridge disasters in American history. What chilled the survivors most was the prophetic aspect. In the weeks before the collapse, reports of the Mothman grew more frequent and increasingly ominous. Several witnesses even claimed to have spotted the figure near the bridge just hours before its failure, as though it were somehow entwined with the catastrophe. Skeptics scrambled for rational explanations. Some suggested it was nothing more than a giant owl or sandhill crane. Others argued mass hysteria fueled the sightings. Yet these theories unraveled when weighed against the sheer consistency of witness reports, the tangible evidence, and the unexplained technological malfunctions linked to the appearances. Local Native American elders offered a different view. They spoke of ancient mountain spirits beings straddling two worlds who emerged as warnings in times of great upheaval. These were not beasts, they said, but messengers or watchers, harbingers of disaster and change. Far from diminishing, decades of research have only deepened the enigma. The Mothman has grown beyond the borders of folklore. It is now a symbol of the vast unknown, a chilling reminder of the limits of human perception. Each year, Point Pleasant hosts a Mothman festival, drawing thousands of enthusiasts, researchers, and the merely curious. A 12-foot metal statue of the being towers in the town square, a monument to an event that refuses rational explanation. So, what was the Mothman? A misidentified animal, a supernatural omen, a prophetic intelligence crossing between dimensions, or something far darker, an awareness that peers into our world only to remind us of how fragile our understanding truly is. The nightmare of Point Pleasant lingers. The mountains guard their mysteries, and somewhere in the dark, the Mothman still waits, forever watching. Now, let's turn to our third story, a chilling saga, revealing how the Appalachian wilderness itself can transform into a portal of unexplainable human vanishing. a haunting legacy that has plagued the remote valleys of eastern Kentucky for generations. The Cannock Chase region is more than just rugged geography. It is a theater of profound darkness, a place where people vanish as if consumed by the land itself, leaving behind only fear, silence, and unanswered questions. This is not the chronicle of one isolated disappearance, but a repeating cycle of vanishings passed through generations, mysteries that continue to elude every logical explanation. The earliest recorded case tied to what would later be known as the Cannock Chase phenomenon unfolded in the summer of 1954. Elizabeth Holloway, a 27-year-old botanist and embarked on a geological research survey deep within the mountains. Her focus was rare ecosystems hidden in the remote highlands, a passion that drove her into terrain few dared to enter. Elizabeth's expedition was planned with precision. She was an experienced outdoorswoman, renowned for her survival skills and meticulous notes. Her last confirmed communication came on July 16, 1954, when she radioed her university team to mark her location within a particularly dense section of the Cannock Chase Range. What followed remains one of Kentucky's most baffling missing person cases. When she failed to return, an exhaustive search was launched. Over 300 volunteers, police, and elite rescue teams combed the region. What they uncovered only deepened the riddle. Her research tools were discovered intact, carefully placed in a small mountain clearing. Her notebooks, collection kits, and even her advanced GPS device, neatly arranged, as if by deliberate hands. Yet what struck investigators most was her final journal entry. Her tidy scientific script, usually exact and clear, had devolved into erratic, frantic scrawls. The last words, etched in desperation, read, "Something watches, not human. The mountain breathes. We are not alone." But Elizabeth's disappearance was only the first. Over the next 40 years, the Cannock Chase Range would swallow at least 17 more individuals, each vanishing under circumstances eerily alike. Seasoned outdoorsmen, survivalists, and researchers, those most familiar with the lands, simply ceased to exist, as though erased. In 1976, veteran wildlife photographer Robert Markham became yet another name on the list, disappearing without a trace while cataloging mountain fauna. His expensive state-of-the-art camera gear was recovered completely undamaged, with the roll of photographs appearing normal, ordinary landscape frames until the final shot. That last image, when placed under forensic analysis, displayed a disturbing collection of irregular distortions. Dark, vaguely human-like silhouettes appeared to rise out of the dense mountain vegetation, their blurred outlines hovering between natural life and something utterly unidentifiable. Oral traditions from the Native American peoples of the area contained warnings long before European settlement. Their accounts described the Canucas territory as a liminal realm of spiritual passage, a place where the veil between our tangible reality and another plane grew dangerously thin. Tribal elders consistently cautioned against entering certain valleys, considering them sacred spaces where no mortal should trespass. These tales were not idle superstitions. Anthropological studies verified a repeated pattern of avoidance across centuries. Multiple indigenous communities deliberately bypassed precise sections of the Caucasus Mountains. Their maps displayed clear omissions, marked with symbols translating into prohibitions tied to supernatural peril. Scientific inquiries produced mysteries of their own. Geological investigations uncovered unexplained electromagnetic disturbances. Compasses spun without cause, equipment failed, and survey data suggested subterranean anomalies or energetic fields unlike anything in known natural science. The largest inquiry was a cooperative effort by the University of Kentucky and the U.S. Geological Survey from 1985 to 1990. Yet much of their data was withheld, ultimately locked under classification. Whispers spread through academia that the team had uncovered evidence of colossal underground cavern networks conflicting with accepted geological models. Dr. Margaret Rhee, the project's lead geologist, gave a puzzling local newspaper interview in 1992 before vanishing without trace. In her last public words, she hinted at revelations that would completely upend modern concepts of geological and biological boundaries. Local police and sheriff's departments compiled a record even more unsettling. Between 1954 and 2000, at least 37 disappearances were traced to the Conic Chase region. These cases shared a chilling feature: the total absence of material remains. Not a single body surfaced, nor was any credible cause determined. The limited trace evidence included microscopic biological residues that defied categorization. DNA analysis failed, producing shifting genetic markers that seemed to morph during microscopic inspection. Generations of inquiry generated questions with no answers. Were these vanishings caused by some unknown predator? Could they be linked to geological anomalies beyond science? Or was it something much worse? Said organized process of human extraction carried out by an intelligence far greater than our comprehension. The Caucasus Range still conceals its secrets. These mountains form a forbidding frontier where wanderers can simply disappear, absorbed into a shadow that observes, selects, and harvests those who trespass too deeply. Some thresholds are never meant to be crossed, and some enigmas will forever hide within the mist-laden valleys of the Appalachian wilds, which leads us to our fourth account, a terrifying saga exposing the supernatural core of Kentucky's most remote highlands, where entities far worse than natural predators prowl the wilderness. The story of the Hellhounds is no modern myth, but a nightmare handed down for generations across the isolated mountains of eastern Kentucky for over 100 years. Dr. Rodriguez's final work, published after her death in 2012, proposed a chilling theory. The miners were not ghosts in the traditional sense, but souls imprisoned collectively, bound by the depth of their suffering and the weight of the tragedy that befell them. Today, Keene Creek remains a tomb of both human loss and supernatural dread. The mountain guards its secret, the miners toil forever in spectral repetition, and the veil between the living and the dead remains paper-thin, as fragile as coal dust adrift in the cold mountain wind. Some doors, it seems, never close. Some stories replay endlessly in the darkness beneath the Appalachians. And now, we move into our sixth account, a disturbing exploration of the most elusive creature said to haunt the dense, fog-drenched woods of Southwest Virginia. A phenomenon that stretches the limits of what we know about animals, perception, and the veiled beings of the Appalachian wilds. Though the name Wood Booger may sound almost absurd, to the people of Virginia's most isolated hollows, it carries nothing but terror. This is no mere campfire joke or recycled Bigfoot tale. This is a body of evidence, documented encounters, and a grim reality that refuses to be dismissed. The first credible accounts date back to the 1920s, from men and women who knew the mountains better than anyone, seasoned hunters, lifelong rangers, and families who had survived generations in the unforgiving shadow of the Appalachians. Thomas Holloway, a seasoned forest ranger who served faithfully from 1935 until 1968, was among the earliest to provide a structured, professional account of the mysterious creature. His carefully preserved field journals later uncovered in the Virginia State Archives outlined a disturbing series of encounters that went far beyond ordinary wildlife reports. Holloway's first documented sighting occurred on a cold October morning in 1942, while carrying out a standard forestry survey deep within the remote Blue Ridge Mountains. He came face to face with a being that resisted all categories of biological science. Nearly 8 feet tall, cloaked in a thick coat of dark, tangled fur that seemed to swallow light rather than reflect it. The creature moved with an unsettling intelligence that implied something far more advanced than a mere undiscovered primate. What set Holloway's testimony apart from typical cryptid tales was the sheer forensic precision of his records. He was no casual witness. but a trained naturalist with decades of experience monitoring wildlife. His descriptions were crisp, analytical, almost clinical. He observed that the entity's mode of locomotion blended both bipedal and quadrupedal movements in a manner unlike any known mammal. Its prints painstakingly measured and catalogued revealed a foot design that was neither fully human nor entirely animal. The most compelling data emerged from a long chain of documented encounters stretching between 1942 and 1965. Multiple independent observers, including U.S. Forest Service staff, hunters, and even geological field teams, corroborated Holloway's accounts with startling consistency. The figure described was not simply a massive unknown beast, but an intelligent presence, deliberately avoiding sustained contact while displaying a predatory awareness of human activity. Dr. Elizabeth Ramsey, a cryptozoologist who dedicated more than 3 decades to studying the phenomenon, later compiled the most exhaustive study, backed quietly by university grants. Her research revealed patterns of behavior that pointed to a sophistication far beyond that of an unclassified species. Forensic testing on collected traces only added to the enigma. Hair samples retrieved from reported sites showed genetic sequences that failed to align with any recognized mammal. Microscopic inspection uncovered cellular features that seemed to hover between animal and plant biology, and anomalies so radical that mainstream institutions initially dismissed it outright. Meanwhile, regional Native American traditions provided important context. The Cherokee and Shawnee had long told of mountain guardians beings who stood watch over the most sacred and inaccessible territories. Their oral lore described entities that were not mere animals, but spiritual stewards, maintaining equilibrium in the wilderness. One of the most remarkable incidents surfaced in 1957, when a geological survey team led by Dr. Marcus Green of the U.S. Geological Survey recorded an extended sighting of a massive bipedal figure in a secluded valley near the Tennessee border. Their notes described the being deliberately moving fallen trees, arranging them into patterns that suggested some form of territorial marking or primitive communication. The chilling hallmark of the wood booger phenomenon was its uncanny selectivity. Reports did not reflect random aggression, but instead revealed an eerie consistency. Those who respected the natural balance, moving quietly and reverently through the mountains, rarely faced direct confrontation. Those who disrupted the terrain, intruded with violence, or employed invasive machinery, however, seemed to provoke hostile responses. By the 1980s, the encounters had shifted. Sightings grew rarer, yet each became more intense. Sophisticated thermal imaging captured fleeting signatures of enormous creatures that inexplicably disappeared frame by frame. Audio logs revealed deep vocalizations operating at frequencies outside the range of normal mammalian sound. Records from local law enforcement and forestry divisions uncovered a troubling trend. Numerous incident files were heavily redacted, with only fragments released to the public. Such patterns of suppression only fueled speculation, lending an air of conspiracy to the growing legend. Dr. Ramsey's final research, published after her death in 2005, presented a bold conclusion. These entities were not merely undiscovered animals, but advanced biological intelligences existing in a cooperative relationship with the mountain environment itself. They functioned as guardians, regulators of an ecological system beyond human comprehension. Today, the lore of the wood booger endures. Sporadic but terrifying encounters remind communities that the Appalachian Mountains conceal secrets far older and darker than science admits. Local traditions reflect a layered relationship with the being, part fear, part reverence, and part recognition of a shared existence. Scholars continue to investigate, yet the wood booger remains elusive, a reminder that in the deepest wilderness, something ancient and intelligent endures. The mountains safeguard their mysteries, and the wood booger still roams its mist-cloaked dominion, a sentinel of a world our species has yet to fully grasp. Now, we turn to our seventh account, a harrowing chronicle of one of America's most devastating and eerily prophetic disasters. A narrative that suggests supernatural forces might collide with human tragedy in ways more horrifying than we dare to imagine. The Silver Bridge, linking Point Pleasant, West Virginia, with Gallipolis, Ohio, was far more than concrete and steel. It was a lifeline and artery carrying commerce, families, and daily life across the Ohio River since its completion in 1928. But on December 15, 1967, that vital span became the stage for a catastrophe that would forever alter our understanding of prophecy, fate, and the fragile threshold between our world and something wholly inexplicable. The story does not begin with the collapse itself, but with the strange events haunting Point Pleasant in the months leading up to that fateful December evening. The Mothman, first sighted in November 1966, had already terrorized the community. Yet it soon came to embody something more than folklore. It became a dark omen, a harbinger of looming disaster. Mary Heyer, a journalist for the Point Pleasant Register, was among the first to document the escalating strangeness. Her carefully kept notebooks, discovered years after her passing, revealed a disturbing sequence of encounters that could not be explained away by logic. In testimony after testimony, townsfolk described repeated appearances of a vast winged creature with glowing red eyes in the months before the collapse. These reports were consistent, detailed, and chilling. This was not dismissed as a bird or dismissed hysteria, but rather evidence of an intelligent, purposeful presence. Farmers, truckers, and even police officers described the being appearing at pivotal times, often near places that would later be associated with tragedy. The most detailed research came from John Keel, the investigator who immersed himself in the Point Pleasant community during the height of the Mothman sightings. His findings went well beyond traditional cryptid studies. He documented a tapestry of phenomena: electrical anomalies, psychic disturbances, unexplained malfunctions, all converging in that single geographic zone. Witnesses consistently noted that before Mothman appeared, lights flickered, televisions failed, and compasses spun chaotically. Entire neighborhoods described electrical systems cutting out in eerie synchronization, leaving the sense that something vast and unseen was exerting its presence. These were not random events, but part of a deliberate pattern of electromagnetic disturbances that indicated something was actively destabilizing the natural physical environment. On the morning of December 15, 1967, these strange omens reached a terrifying climax. Dozens of eyewitnesses described heightened Mothman activity throughout Point Pleasant and the neighboring areas. Harold Brewer, a truck driver from the region, swore he saw the winged creature perched on a hillside only hours before disaster struck. Its enormous wings folded tight, its piercing red eyes locked directly onto the Silver Bridge. The collapse itself unfolded as a vision of horror, steel and cables giving way in an instant of mechanical ruin and human tragedy. At 5:04 p.m., during the heavy evening commute, the Silver Bridge suddenly crumbled. A structure that had carried traffic for nearly 4 decades disintegrated without warning. 46 people perished as their vehicles plunged into the icy Ohio River. Later, forensic analysis traced the catastrophe to a single eyebar in the suspension chain that fractured, triggering a rapid structural breakdown. Yet, even with this explanation, the surrounding circumstances could not be dismissed as mere engineering failure. Survivors and bystanders alike reported uncanny phenomena both immediately before and during the collapse. Multiple witnesses claimed to see a vast winged form near the bridge, not airborne, but ominously present. Radio transmissions went haywire, emergency communications failed, and technical systems faltered without rational cause. Dr. Eleanor Rodriguez, a forensic psychologist who dedicated decades to unraveling the case, produced the most extensive psychological profile of those who lived through it. Her findings showed a consistent thread: Witnesses described an overwhelming feeling of being watched, of existing inside a reality that felt both authentic and dreamlike. Indigenous tribes of the Ohio Valley carried their own interpretations. Their stories told of bridge spirits, supernatural entities able to forecast and even influence moments of great human catastrophe. To them, the Mothman was not a mere creature, but a warning made flesh, a herald of immense suffering bound to both earth and spirit. Investigations of the disaster site uncovered further anomalies. Instruments recorded strange electromagnetic activity. Soil samples displayed elements not native to the geological layers surrounding the bridge. It appeared as if the very landscape had been reshaped by processes unknown to conventional science. What renders the Silver Bridge calamity most chilling is the prophetic nature of the sightings. Dozens of reports placed the Mothman in key locations tied directly to the looming disaster, long before the collapse occurred. This was not a haphazard cryptid encounter, but a sequence of manifestations, implying a deliberate, almost intelligent awareness of the tragedy to come. Author John Keel, in his groundbreaking book The Mothman Prophecies, advanced a radical interpretation. He argued the Mothman was not simply an animal or monster, but an intelligent force capable of perceiving or even shaping future events. It served as a threshold being, a living connection between the limits of our world and realities beyond comprehension. Years of inquiry have not unraveled the riddle. If anything, time has thickened the fog of mystery. The Silver Bridge disaster stands as one of the most rigorously chronicled paranormal episodes in U.S. history. Today, a memorial rises near the site, honoring the 46 lost lives. Yet to those who know the deeper history, it is more than remembrance. It is a dire signal, a reminder that forces exist far outside our understanding, powers operating beyond time, space, or human perception. The Mothman endures. In legend, the mountains hold their secrets, and the boundary between worlds remains thin, as fragile as the mist drifting through Appalachian valleys. Some warnings can never be fully deciphered. Some prophecies are spoken in ways human minds cannot grasp, which brings us to our eighth account, a haunting exploration of one of the deepest archaeological enigmas hidden within the Appalachian Range. A story that overturns accepted theories of migration, cultural endurance, and the secret shadows of the ancient Blue Ridge Mountains. The legend of the Lost Tribe is no mere academic curiosity. It is a labyrinthine and unsettling chronicle of a vanished people disappearing without trace, leaving only fragments, whispers, and a sense of mystery that has unsettled researchers for generations. The first systematic investigations began in the 1920s, when Dr. William Harrison, an anthropologist with the University of North Carolina, uncovered unusual archaeological sites far within the most inaccessible reaches of the Blue Ridge. These settlements were unlike any standard Native American habitation. The artifacts, building remains, and cultural markers indicated a culture outside of established historical frameworks. Harrison's findings were immediately dismissed by his peers, accused of fabrication or error. But Harrison was no fraud. His record was spotless, and his documentation precise. In 1923, his team located an elaborate network of caves. These were not mere shelters, but engineered complexes. Signs of extended habitation were everywhere: carefully carved water channels, food storage chambers, and defensive structures reflecting a sophistication far beyond their supposed age. Stranger still were the artifacts retrieved: pottery etched with alien designs, absent from all known indigenous styles; tools forged from metals that did not correspond with any metallurgical practices of the time; and most disturbing of all, skeletal remains with genetic traits unmatched in existing anthropological studies. In the late 1990s, geneticist Dr. Elena Rodriguez analyzed the preserved DNA and made a revelation that shook the discipline. The samples were recognizably human, yet contained markers that were both familiar and entirely foreign, implying a long epoch of isolated development. From 1998 to 2005, a coalition of the Smithsonian Institution and several top universities conducted the most thorough study ever attempted. Their results never reached the public. Much of the data was classified or erased. Oral traditions of the Cherokee and neighboring tribes, however, filled gaps. Their stories spoke not of myth, but of a real shadow people, a civilization predating their own, coexisting with the land in delicate harmony. The most terrifying detail of all was how this people vanished. The evidence showed no gradual decline, no slow assimilation, but an immediate disappearance. Archaeological layers froze in time-abandoned meals, left on stone tables, tools mid-assembly, industries cut short. It was as though the entire society had been lifted away in an instant. Lead archaeologist Dr. Marcus Holloway advanced a radical thesis before his disappearance in 2007. The tribe had not migrated or died out. They had been removed by forces outside human science. His surviving notes suggested a vast supernatural intervention. Geological testing confirmed further mysteries. Settlement areas radiated electromagnetic disturbances, and soil samples contained alien elements, implying the land itself had been altered. Local legends supported these findings. Hunters spoke of regions where time behaved strangely, where compasses spun erratically, where electronics failed without reason. These anomalies formed not a scattering of coincidences, but a structured pattern. Secret international genetic analyses revealed something even more astonishing. The tribe's DNA hinted at a period of isolation stretching back thousands of years, creating a branch of humanity unlike any other. By 2010, official inquiry had all but collapsed. Papers were pulled, funding dissolved, and those who pursued the subject faced suspicious setbacks. Dr. Rodriguez's final study, released only after her death in 2015, ventured into territory bordering on the metaphysical. The lost tribe was far more than a forgotten cluster of people. It was a civilization that had fused so deeply with the mountain ecosystem that its culture, technology, and very identity became woven into the landscape itself. Even today, the enigma of that vanished people persists. Occasional fragments surface, a shard of pottery with an unfamiliar glaze, a tool fashioned from an alloy unknown to modern metallurgy, each discovery teasing at a much larger story that still refuses to be fully told. The Blue Ridge Mountains hold those secrets tight. The lost tribe remains missing, a reminder that human history is stranger and more layered than we usually admit. Some societies are never meant to be uncovered. Some narratives are destined to remain forever submerged in the damp, mist-thick ribs of the Appalachian wilderness. Now we turn to our ninth tale, a harrowing probe into one of the most dreadful supernatural figures in Native American lore, a legend that goes beyond myth to expose a darkness that has stalked the Appalachian lands for generations. The Wampus Cat is not merely a local fright. It is a complex embodiment of cultural trauma. It represents a supernatural order that addresses transgression, punishment, and the porous frontier between flesh and spirit. Steeped in Cherokee tradition, the legend tells of a transformation so terrible and so profoundly symbolic that it forces us to rethink what punishment, shame, and spiritual law mean within a living cultural system. According to the oldest Cherokee oral accounts, the tale begins with a woman of inquisitive and rebellious temperament who committed what her community deemed the gravest of violations. Long before Europeans set foot in these mountains, women were strictly forbidden from witnessing the sacred hunting ceremonies reserved for men, rituals that maintained a sacred balance between humans and the spirit world. Refusing to accept this prohibition, the woman devised a clandestine plan. She fashioned a specialized mask from mountain cat hide, designed to conceal her humanity so she could stealthily observe the men's rites. By night, she prepared the mask with a skill that revealed a deep understanding of animal behavior and ceremonial symbolism. When the hunters gathered for their most secret rite, she crept into the shadows wearing her disguise, intent on seeing what had been denied her. But the spirit guardians that watched over the ritual were not fooled. In the instant of her transgression, as she beheld the ceremony's most sacrosanct moments, something beyond ordinary retribution occurred. The forest's ancestral power, the collective spiritual force of her people, enacted a transformation. It was not simple punishment. It altered her at a fundamental, almost cellular level. Her body and the mountain cat's skin fused, producing a being that was neither wholly human nor entirely feline. She became the first wampus cat, a cursed hybrid condemned to exist in a liminal, terrifying state, forever suspended between the human world and the spirit realm. The curse carried on beyond a single life. It propagated through subsequent generations as a spiritual mechanism to enforce sacred boundaries and cultural norms. Anthropologist Dr. Alina Rodriguez, who devoted more than 20 years to studying Cherokee spiritual practice, compiled numerous generational testimonies of wampus sightings and encounters. Her fieldwork exposed recurring patterns of manifestation that exceeded folkloric expectation. Witness accounts repeatedly described an entity that appeared at once eerily familiar and fundamentally alien, an intelligence that did not behave like any ordinary predator. The wampus cat acted less like a random hunter and more like a guardian of spiritual and ecological boundaries. Fragmentary but intriguing forensic investigations conducted in the region's most secluded reaches have produced suggestive evidence. Trackways show hybrid characteristics, blending human gait and feline paw prints. Hair samples contain genetic markers that current scientific taxonomies cannot account for, hinting at a biological anomaly outside conventional classification. Reports from park rangers and rural law enforcement in remote Appalachian jurisdictions form a consistent pattern. Wampus cat encounters are rarely unselective attacks. They appear targeted, almost ritualistic, focusing on individuals who have transgressed specific spiritual or ecological laws.